Texas Hill Country, May 1881. The wind carried dust and silence across the dry plain, broken only by the thunder of hooves and the girl in white running for her life. Willas Frayne spotted her just past the ridge barefoot, veil torn, face streaked with dirt and panic. She darted through the mesquite like a deer, her skirts snagging on thorns, breath shallow and ragged. Her dress was a bride's, but no carriage followed. No groom, no family. Nothing but blood at the hem and a look in her eyes like she had seen the devil and outrun him. Willas dismounted before his mare even stopped moving. His boots hit the earth and he ran to her, heart hammering against his ribs. "Miss," he called. "Stop. You're hurt." She staggered, spun around wild-eyed, and raised a broken branch like a blade. Her hands shook. Her lips were cracked, but she stood her ground. "Do not touch me," she rasped. "I am not here to hurt you," Willas said, low and steady. He held his palms out. "My name is Willas Frayne. I own a ranch 3 miles east. You are bleeding." She blinked fast, like she was trying to process his words, but they kept slipping away. Her legs gave out. Willas caught her before she hit the ground. She flinched hard, but did not fight. He lifted her gently. She weighed near nothing and carried her to his horse. "I will take you home now. You are safe." She did not speak again on the ride back. That night, she slept in the old guest room beneath a patched quilt his mother had made. The doctor came, stitched the cut on her thigh, and left with more questions than answers. Willas answered none. He had none to give. She did not give her name. Willas did not ask again. She sat by the fire the next evening, wrapped in a fresh dress from his late sister's trunk, sipping weak coffee with both hands. Her knuckles were scraped raw. Her cheekbone was purpled. "You got folks I should write to?" he asked. She shook her head. "A husband." She looked him dead in the eye. "Not anymore." That was all she ever said about it. For days she stayed quiet, ate little, slept light. She flinched at ranch hands' voices and never let anyone stand behind her. But she watched Willas, watched the way he treated his horse like a friend, watched how he tended the garden his mother once loved, watched how he said little but meant everything he said. He never pressed her, never hovered, just gave her space and time and quiet. One morning, she joined him in feeding the chickens. She carried the tin of grain without being asked. He did not say a word, just handed her a second scoop. By the end of the week, she was helping in the kitchen, humming under her breath. It was the first time he heard her voice not cracked with fear. "You got a name?" he asked that evening as she folded laundry on the porch bench. She paused. Her fingers curled around a cotton sleeve. "I do," she said. She did not tell him what it was. He nodded once, respectful. Weeks passed. She began to laugh sometimes, soft and sudden, like she forgot she was allowed. She helped mend fence posts, tied her hair back with twine, and started calling the milk cow Bossy. She was not a wife anymore, but she was something, and she was healing. One afternoon, Willas found her at the stream behind the barn, barefoot again, skirt hiked up as she let the water run over her feet. "You look like peace," he said. She smiled, just a little. "Do not let it fool you." He stepped closer. "You could stay, you know." "Why?" "Because you are safe here. Because I want you to." She looked at him then, really looked. Her eyes were gold brown and tired and learning how to trust again. "I do not even know who I am anymore." "You are whoever you choose to be now," he said. "That is enough for me." She leaned into him, and for the first time, she let herself rest her head against his chest. That night, she told him her name. Olivine Vera. He repeated it like a vow. The next morning, she wore a pale yellow dress that had once belonged to Willas's mother. She braided her hair and tied a ribbon at the end. The bruises on her arms had faded, but the weight in her eyes still lingered. He found her on the porch again, hands in her lap. "I want to start over," she said, "but I do not know how." He crouched beside her, took her hand. "You already are." That Sunday, she rode with him into town for supplies. Folks stared. Whispers followed. No one dared speak to her, but they all looked. No one knew her name. But Willas stood beside her, hand at her back, eyes steady and proud. "She is with me," he said simply. "That is all you need to know." And that was the end of it. Back at the ranch, she helped him build a chicken coop. She laughed when he dropped a hammer on his foot. He grinned at the sound. He called her darlin', once without thinking. She did not flinch. She smiled. One night, thunder rolled over the hills. Rain came down hard. She woke crying and could not say why. Willas sat beside her bed, took her hand, and did not let go. "You are not alone anymore," he said. She whispered, "I know." 2 months passed. Willas rode into town one morning, bought a simple gold ring, and came back with it wrapped in a handkerchief. He found her at the creek again, washing linens. He knelt. "I know what you have been through. I know you are still healing. But I love you, Olivine. I want to build a life with you, if you will have me." She dropped the sheet she was rinsing. Her hands trembled, but her eyes were clear. "I want that too," she said. "I want you." They married under the cottonwoods behind the ranch with only the wind and the sky for witnesses. He kissed her like she was a blessing, and when he carried her over the threshold, he whispered, "You are mine now, my bride, my everything." She smiled, and for the first time, her smile reached her eyes. And just like that, the girl no one knew had finally been seen. She was safe, and she was loved. The peach trees above the north field were blooming late that year. Willas stood beneath them, pruning shears in hand, watching Olivine kneel in the loose earth between rows of early squash. Her hair was braided down her back, a long dark rope that swayed with each shift of her shoulders. She dug with a small spade, careful not to disturb the roots already reaching down. "You're planting too close," Willas said, wiping sweat from his brow. She didn't look up. "I measured the spacing with my hand, just as your mother's journal said." He stepped closer, crouched beside her. "You read my mother's journal?" She nodded, finally glancing his way. "Every page, twice. Her handwriting slants left when she's tired." Willas softened. "She'd have liked you. She'd have worried about me," Olivine said. "But I think she'd have come around. She would have made you cornbread and told you where all the neighbors bury their secrets." That coaxed a small breath from her. Not quite a laugh, but fuller than quiet. She pressed her thumb into the soil, smoothing it flat. "You ever plant before?" he asked. "Only window herbs. In a jar." "Well, now you've got a whole hill." She turned her wrist and let the sunlight catch the copper band on her ring finger. The gesture wasn't intentional, just a flick of light, but it made something settle in his chest. "I still wake up waiting to run," she said. He set down the clippers. "You don't have to explain that." "I want to," she said. "Some nights I dream I'm back in that carriage, that he's beside me again. I wake up and I forget where I am, for a breath or two." Willas didn't speak. He didn't need to. "But then I hear the chickens," she added, "and your boots on the floorboards. And I remember." He reached for her hand, palm dusty, nails lined with soil. She let him hold it. "I'm not afraid anymore," she whispered. "Then you're braver than most." That evening she made supper without help. Collards cooked down with bacon ends, cornmeal mush fried crisp around the edges, and a jar of wild plum preserves opened on the table. Willas sat at the head of the table, same as always, but this time she took the seat beside him, not across. He watched her eat, slow and steady, her jaw set with the quiet focus she gave to everything. When she reached for more preserves, her wrist brushed his. She didn't pull away. After the dishes were done and the lamp trimmed low, they sat on the porch while the sky turned violet. Willas leaned back in the rocker, boot heel tapping gently against the board. "You ever thought about learning to shoot?" he asked. She blinked at him. "Why would I? It's useful. Out here, you can't always wait for someone else to do the protecting. I've never fired a gun. I can teach you." She looked down at her hands. "Will it make the dreams stop?" "No," he said. "But it might help you sleep easier knowing you don't have to run again." She nodded once. Then yes. The next morning, he set out 2 tin cans on the fence post behind the barn. She wore one of his old shirts over her dress, sleeves rolled to the elbow. The revolver weighed awkward in her grip. "Feet apart," he said. "Not too wide. You're not bracing for a storm." She adjusted. "Like this. Better. Now breathe." She missed the first 5 shots. Hit the 6th. Her face didn't change, but her shoulders dropped half an inch. "I want to try again," she said. She stayed out for over an hour. By the end of it, the cans were dented through and her arms were trembling. That night she didn't wake. She began rising earlier, walking the fence line before breakfast. Once, he found her repairing a broken gate latch with baling wire and a rock. "You know you're allowed to rest now," he said. "I know," she said, tightening the knot. "But I like fixing things." He leaned against the post. "You ever think about why you stopped running?" "I didn't stop," she said. "I arrived." Willas looked at her then, really looked. The wind had tangled a curl loose from her braid. There was dirt beneath her fingernails. Her lips were chapped. But there was something steady in her now. Something unshakable. "I want to build something here," she said. "Not just mend what's broken. I mean something new." He waited. "I want chickens of my own," she continued. "A milk goat. Maybe bees. We can do all of that." She smiled, slow and sure. "And I want to paint the back room. That yellow makes it feel like a sick room. Pick a color, Olivine. You've got the final say on everything in that house." "I'll hold you to that," she said. "You'd better." He kissed her then, slow and certain, there in the orchard with the sun low behind her. She kissed him back with both hands on his face, and the taste of plum still on her lips. She didn't run. And he didn't let go. The bees arrived in a wooden crate with slatted sides, humming low and steady like a fiddle played slow and careful. Willas set the box beneath the elm near the far fence, and Olivine stood beside him, arms folded against the spring chill. "They're smaller than I thought," she said, watching a few crawl over the mesh. "They'll fill 10 hives come July if they settle right," he told her. "You sure this is what you want?" "I've never been surer of anything that stings," she said. He glanced sideways, then handed her the veil and gloves. She took them wordlessly and began to dress, her movements precise. The cotton tied snug beneath her chin, the netting falling over her eyes like sheer smoke. "You read every page of that beekeeping pamphlet, didn't you?" he asked. "I read it 3 times, and I copied the diagrams. Twice." "That right?" She nodded. "I don't like surprises." He watched as she knelt beside the crate, waited for the right moment, and opened the latch with the back end of a spoon. A few bees rose, circled, and drifted toward the blooming clover. She didn't flinch. That evening, she came in with her hair sweet with pollen and her voice thick with wonder. "They're gentle," she said, sitting at the small table where she'd begun keeping a ledger. "One landed on my sleeve and just stayed there a while. I reckon they know who they belong to," Willas said, setting a jar of boiled potatoes beside her. She traced a fingertip down the margin of her notes. I want to try rendering the wax. I think I can make soap. He smiled through a mouthful of cornbread. You planning to take over the whole ranch? No, she said. Just the parts with potential. Later that week, she found the faded quilt squares stuffed in a crate behind the barn. The colors had softened to pale rust and ash blue, but the stitching lines were still visible. She laid them out on the porch floor, arranging and rearranging by instinct. These were meant to be someone's, she murmured. Willas leaned against the doorframe. They were my sisters. She started piecing it before she passed. Never finished. Olivine looked up. Do you mind if I do? I think she'd be glad. She worked on it in the early dusk hours, needle flashing steady through the cotton, her brow furrowed in concentration. Willas often sat nearby, whittling or sipping coffee gone cold, saying nothing. One night, she held up a finished panel and said, I don't remember much from before I came here, just flashes. But I remember the way the curtains looked in my mother's kitchen. They had little red flowers like this one. Willas set down his carving. You never told me anything about your family. I left them behind. Not by choice. Her voice remained even. My father was a preacher, strict and full of thunder. My mother smiled when he wasn't looking. She ran her thumb along a seam. There were 4 of us girls. I was the youngest. They married me off to settle a debt. She let that hang between them. The wind moved through the porch rafters like it was listening too. I didn't think I'd ever feel whole again, she said. But this life, it fits. He stepped closer, kneeling until they were eye level. You're not a piece of something broken, Olivine. You're the whole thing. She set the quilt panel aside and reached for his hand. You always know what to say when I don't want to hear anything. The next morning, she took Bossy the cow to the creek pasture alone, whistling under her breath, a tune unfamiliar to him. When she came back, she had a bouquet of wild yarrow tucked under her arm and a cut on her palm from a barbed wire snag. He cleaned the wound at the wash basin. She didn't wince. He said, You're tougher than any man I've ever known. She said, I've had to be. That night, they danced in the kitchen to no music at all. She hummed low and he matched her rhythm. Their feet scuffed the floorboards, and their hands found each other's without hesitation. Her head rested against his shoulder, and neither said a word until the kettle whistled. Do you ever miss what came before? She asked quietly. He held her a little closer. Only when I forget how far we've come. She nodded slowly. Then let's keep going. And so they did. By early June, the sycamore leaves had grown broad enough to shade the edge of the spring house, and Olivine spent long afternoons there, pressing mint into stone crocks and laying cheesecloth over jars of cooled milk. The work steadied her. The quiet wrapped around her shoulders like muslin, thin but sure. She had begun to keep track of the days not by fear or flight, but by the scent of the air and the weight of the sun. Willas came down from the ridge at midday with a fresh gash above his brow. Blood dried into his hairline. What on earth? She started, setting the jar aside. Horse spooked at a rattler, he said, brushing dirt from his shirt. Didn't throw me, but I caught the edge of a branch. She wet a cloth and stepped close. Hold still. He didn't argue. He tipped his head, quiet as she dabbed gently at the wound. Her fingers were careful, her eyes sharper than the sting of the alcohol she used. You need stitches, she said. I've had worse. That isn't the point. He looked at her steady. You always speak like someone who's had to keep others from falling apart. I suppose I have, she murmured. But I don't want to patch you up because I have to, Willas. I do it because you're mine to look after. He didn't say anything to that. He just took her hand, turned it over, and kissed her wrist right at the place where her pulse fluttered. That night, She opened the ledger she'd begun keeping on the hutch shelf and added a page. Injuries and incidents. She wrote the date in neat script and noted the cause. Below it, she wrote, reckless, but not beyond repair. The following morning, Willas brought home 3 cedar planks and a spool of waxed twine. What's that for? She asked, watching him unload the wagon. You wanted a place for the bee frames to rest. Thought I'd build you a box. Maybe 2. I didn't ask. You shouldn't have to. She touched the edge of one of the boards. You always give more than you take. I never felt the need to keep count. He worked on the boxes while she tended the kitchen garden, and by dusk, she had basil drying on the rafters while he sanded the last corners smooth. You think we could sell the honey? She asked. Might get a fair price if we jar it clean. I could stitch the cloth caps, she said, already picturing the rows on the shelf. Maybe add a note. Folks like stories with their sweetness. He chuckled low in his throat. You planning to charm the whole county? Only the parts that pay in coin. Later, she stood barefoot in the doorway, watching the fire burn down in the stove. Willas came in from the barn, boots in hand, face streaked with the day's work. You ever miss the noise? She asked. Music, crowds, a streetcar clanging past? I've never had a taste for too many voices all at once. I used to think silence was a punishment. And now it's the only thing that feels honest. He stepped beside her, set his boots down. You're not the same woman who came through the mesquite. I know, she said. That woman didn't believe in a future. He wrapped his arm around her waist, pulling her gently against him. And this one knows the sound of your footsteps in the hallway, and that you hum when you brush down the horses. And that when you're thinking hard, you thumb the edge of your belt like it might hold answers. Willas smiled, soft and full. You've been keeping notes on me. I keep notes on what matters. They stood together in the doorway until the fire burned low and the wind picked up through the field grass. In the darkness, she reached for his hand without looking. Willas, I'd like to have a child. His breath caught just once, but his fingers closed around hers without hesitation. Then we will. I want them to grow up knowing the land, not the world I came from. Not fear. They'll know roots instead of escape, and love instead of debt. He turned to face her fully, brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. We'll give them that. I swear it. She touched his chest, right over the place where his heartbeat lived, strong and steady. I believe you, she said. They didn't speak again that night. They didn't need to. When they climbed into bed, the window opened to let in the scent of summer grass. She rested her head in the crook of his shoulder, hand splayed over his ribs. And for the first time since crossing the threshold of his home, she slept without dreams. The late summer sun had begun to soften, its light slanting gold through the cotton fields south of the ridge. Olivine stood at the edge of the orchard, her hand resting on the curve of her stomach, now gently rounded. The bees moved through the alfalfa without hurry, and the air was thick with the scent of ripening fruit. She wore a dress she'd let out at the seams 2 weeks earlier, the stitches neat and even, but her fingers had grown slower. Each morning came with a new weight, a quiet ache in her lower back, a deeper stillness in her breath. Willas watched her from the fence line, where he was tying new rope across the gatepost. He set the last knot and walked to her side without calling out. You're pushing too long in the heat, he said, brushing a bit of hay from her shoulder. I wanted to see the plums before the birds got to them. He followed her gaze. We'll cover them tomorrow. I'll help. She nodded, then leaned slightly into him, not from weariness, but because she wanted to. It's strange, she said. I thought I'd feel afraid again, but I don't. You've already survived the worst of things. I think I'm still learning what it is to be safe. Willas reached for her hand, lacing their fingers together. You're not learning alone. They walked back to the house slowly. The porch steps creaked under their weight, and inside, the air was cool with damp cloths hung over the window panes. She sat at the table while he poured a glass of buttermilk and set it in front of her. There's something I've been meaning to ask, he said as he pulled up a chair. She turned toward him. What is it? I've got a deed in my name, to this house, the land, the barn. But that doesn't sit right anymore. Her brow lifted, quiet and curious. I want to have it changed, he said slowly, to both our names, yours and mine. Olivine ran a fingertip along the grain of the table. That wouldn't have been done where I came from. I know, he said, but this is our place, our life. She looked up at him, eyes clear and steady. Then yes, I'd like that. Outside, the breeze stirred the laundry hung to dry, and Bossy lowed once from the back pasture. I've been thinking about names, she said after a moment. For the baby. He leaned his elbows on the table. Let's hear them. If it's a boy, I thought maybe Elias. After the grandfather I remember most. He used to carry peppermints in his coat. Willas nodded. Willas Frayne. That's a name with weight. And if it's a girl, I thought about naming her after your sister. Only if that feels right to you. His jaw shifted slightly, not with pain, but something close to it. Then he reached across the table and took her hand again. It feels right, she exhaled. Lenora, then. Lenora Vera Frayne. They didn't speak after that, not for a while. The silence was easy now, shared. As the days shortened, Olivine stopped tending the bees, though she still visited them often. She spent more time in the rocker by the hearth, making small clothes by lamplight. Willas built a cradle from pine, each board sanded smooth, the joints fit without nails. He lined it with one of the old quilts she'd stitched back in spring, the one with the faded red flower that reminded her of her mother's kitchen. When labor came, it came slow and steady, without panic. The midwife arrived from town in the gray light before dawn. Olivine gripped Willas's hand through each wave, her body tense but her eyes never turning from his. The birth was quiet, without screaming, without fear. By mid-morning, a girl lay swaddled in Olivine's arms, dark-haired and long-fingered, her mouth shaped like sleep. She's perfect, Willas whispered, brushing a thumb down the baby's cheek. Olivine smiled, worn but certain. She's ours. They named her Lenora, just as planned. In the weeks that followed, the house shifted around them. Cloth diapers hung on the line beside the kitchen towels. The cradle sat near the hearth, close enough for Olivine to reach from her chair. Willas kept a rifle by the door, though there'd been no trouble in months. He said it was for foxes, but she knew it was for peace of mind. One afternoon, as he repaired a loose shutter, he heard Olivine humming from the front room. Not the soft, uncertain notes she'd once used to fill silence, but a full melody, rich and strong. He stepped inside, wiping his hands on a rag, and found her swaying gently with Lenora tucked against her shoulder. "You've got a voice, wife," he said, standing in the doorway. She glanced over and smiled. "I used to sing when I was a girl, before I forgot how. Don't stop again." She didn't. Years passed, and the rhythms of their life settled in deep. Olivine taught their daughter how to read from the tattered books she'd salvaged from town. Willas taught her how to track a trail, how to mend a fence, how to speak plainly and keep her word. They grew old slowly, with knees that ached in the cold and hands that remembered every task before it was needed. They never left the land. By the time Lenora was tall enough to reach the sour cherry branches with her own hands, the ranch had grown into something more than a place. It was a home made of all the things they had built together. Trust, care, and the quiet strength of love that asked for nothing but gave everything. And when the porch light burned low in the evening, and the sun slipped behind the far hill, Olivine would rest her head against Willas's shoulder, their fingers still twined, and listen to the soft sounds of a life that had once felt impossible. They were more than survivors. They were whole, forever.